Welcome everybody to this WAFFA event with Ha Nguyen. WAFFA is WAFFA, or Wharton Alumni Founders and Funders Association, is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to accelerate the success of Penn Wharton female founders and investors. Today, about 13% of Penn founders are women, but they only raise 6% of the venture capital. WAFFA harness the power of the Penn Wharton network to educate, support, and foster connection for female founders and funders. So here's some structure about this talk. So we're going to please ask all your questions in the chat box. No, sorry. Please ask all your questions in the Q&A box, and we will answer them after Ha's presentation. And in the chat box, you will find social media handles for WAFFA and Ha, and also a list of upcoming events. So now I would like to introduce Ha. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Ha here with us today. She is a founding partner at Spero Venture, a mission-driven VC firm. She is also the co-founder of Women in Product, a former product leader, and a Wharton grad. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you to the Wharton Founders and Funders Association for hosting me today. I did want to share that this year was my 25th Penn reunion, and I was so excited to come back to the campus, it has been many years since I've been back, but unfortunately COVID hit, and I'm hoping to be able to go back next year and celebrate my reunion with my awesome classmates. I also want to thank everybody who is on the line and who's joining for hopefully a very informative talk on startups and product management. And I really want to thank those of you who are, not just through your words, but through your action, working to fight racial inequality, to move us to a more just, equitable, and fair society. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. So with that, I have a few slides to share. I think my talk is going to be about 30 or 40 minutes, and hopefully we'll still have lots of time at the end for a bunch of Q&A. So my talk is on product management and startups, and I just did want to share first a little bit about my Silicon Valley career. So before I moved out to Silicon Valley in 2000, I got my undergrad at Wharton in 1995, and then did a short stint in New York City as a management consultant before going off to Harvard Business School. And then I knew, even while I was at school, that I had to be out in Silicon Valley. I had to be at the heart of where all of the tech innovation was taking place. And so I was fortunate enough to get a job as a product manager at eBay during the earliest years of eBay. At the time, I had no idea what product management was, but I quickly learned on the job. And I was there during this amazing 5-year period of hyper growth. And I really got a chance to experience once-in-a-lifetime things at eBay. One of the things I realized about eBay, though, towards the end of that career, was that I just loved the early stage startup journey. So I loved not just early stage company building and product building, but also team building, culture building, business model building. And so I really wanted to go and start all over again, to join some early stage startups. And so the next 4 companies that I worked at were all venture-backed startups where I joined either at the seed or the Series A. A couple of them were similar to eBay, had an incredible growth story, and I was there during a period of hypergrowth, and a couple of them failed miserably. And so I've seen the whole spectrum of the highs and the lows of the startup journey, and hopefully developed some wisdom along the way that I'm hoping to share with you today. About 4 years ago, I got a chance to move into the world of venture capital. I joined as an executive in residence at Omidyar Network, and then 6 months later became a product partner. And what a product partner does is really work with the portfolio on product. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to spin out with my team to form Spero Ventures, and I'm the founding partner, one of the founding partners of Spero Ventures. We are an early stage venture capital firm that invests in the things that make life worth living. And it's across 3 core areas: our well-being, our work and purpose, and human connection. And think about our investments as investments in hopefully generational companies that have both purpose and profits at its core. So mission-driven companies that can scale to become billion-dollar unicorns, like an eBay or like a Tesla. And so if you believe that you are building one of those companies, I hope that you'll reach out and come talk to me. All right, so I wanted to share a number of different topics today, starting with some of the PM frameworks that I've learned during my career as a product leader. And so these are not a comprehensive list, but hopefully some of my favorite frameworks that you'll take some lessons away from. Okay, so first we want to start with
one second. Are you sharing your screen?
Oh, I can do that. I'm sorry, I did not realize I was not sharing my screen. So let me do that. Thanks for catching that, Caroline. All right, so let me start over here and play. You can see the screen now, right? Yes. Okay, so just went through that slide, PM frameworks. Okay, so here is the slide on what every founder and PM should answer. So there's really 4 key questions. 1 is, who is my target customer? 2 is, what is my unique insight about that customer? 3 is, how can I deliver value to my customer through the product? And then 4 is, how will I know that we're successful, right? So how can I measure my product success? And so what I encourage, whether you're a founder or a product leader or a product manager, what I encourage you to do is that at every meeting that you can, whether that's an all hands meeting, a product strategy meeting, or even a meeting with engineering to tell them and brainstorm with them what we should be building, you really need to just sort of start with the why, right? So like, who is it that we're servicing, and what do we know about them, and why do we believe that this is the right solution for them, and what do we hope to achieve if our product is successful? So those are just 4 key questions to keep in mind. And another way to highlight that, let me see. Let me click here. Okay, another way to highlight it is through the Lean Product Pyramid that my friend Dan Olson, who is the author of the Lean Product Playbook, developed. And it really is like, as you're an early stage founder or even a product manager at your organization, how do you achieve product market fit? And the way to achieve product market fit is you start at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the market. And again, identifying who is your customer. So whose life is it that you want to make better? Who do you want to create value for? What are the pain points that you need to address for them? And once you understand who your target customer is, it's time to go and talk to those customers to really understand not just what their needs are, but what their underserved needs are, right? Because if their needs are well served in the marketplace, then they may not have a need to use your product or solution. So you really want to identify not just their needs, but what's underserved in the marketplace where they still have pain. Once you have this key insight, then the next stage is really around the product. And the first step around the product is your value proposition. So how do we plan to be best in the market? What makes us unique and different? So how are we going to stand out relative to the competition? And that is where product strategy lives, which is in the number 3 section, which is the value proposition. Once you've defined that, then what comes next is really the feature set. So that's the functionality of what you're going to deliver to your users. And the UX is really the design that brings that functionality to life. And hopefully all along the way, you're testing your product with users to make sure that it is indeed valuable and usable for them. And you get any insights from that testing to then evolve your product. And so when you've achieved product market fit, the way that you will know is that you know that your product serves the market that you're going after incredibly well, like so well that customers have love for the product and they tell all their friends about the product. So that's one framework that I love to share with folks. Another framework that I love to share is around the separation of the problem space versus the solution space. So when I start working with product teams and startups for the first time, a lot of them tend to want to spend all their time in the solution space, right? So they have great ideas around what they should be building for their customers, and then they just want to start working on their ideas. But what I encourage teams to do is to spend as much, if not more time, in the problem space, right? So go out and talk to as many customers as possible who are in the target market, really understand their world and observe their world in their environment, and really have a point of view around what their needs are, what their pain points are, what's underserved for them before moving on to the solution space. So just to highlight this and share one example of a team that I thought did this really, really well, was a team, a company was Class Dojo. The founders were Sam and Liam, who started their company, I believe in about 2003 or 2004. They were teachers themselves, and their hypothesis was that they wanted to build an edtech company and that they should deliver lesson plans to help them with the lessons for the next day. But instead of going out and building that solution, they decided that they were going to spend the entire summer really testing that hypothesis to make sure that that was the right solution. So they went out and they talked to 150 teachers to really understand the problem space. So they lived all summer in the world of the problem space. And after talking to 150 teachers, one of the things that they realized was actually the problem for the teachers and their pain point was not at all around lesson planning. What it was around the culture of the classroom, right? So like in every single class, there was always that one or two kid that disrupted the class for everybody else. And it would take the teachers 10 or 15 minutes to settle the class down before actually getting into the lesson. And so with that key insight, Liam and Sam took that insight back to the team and started generating ideas around what the solution could be. And what they came up with was a behavioral recognition tool so that the teachers could reward students and recognize students every time they demonstrated behaviors that the teachers wanted other students in the classroom to model, such as active listening or teamwork. When Liam and Sam shared their solution back with the teachers that they had interviewed back that one summer, the teachers loved it and started using it and started telling other teacher friends. So fast forward about 7-8 years later, Class Dojo is used, millions of parents, teachers, and students are using the product still to this day. So that's, I think, just a great example of living in the problem space before going into the solution space. So I love this quote from Steve Blank. So Steve says that in a startup, no facts exist inside the building, only opinions. So if you're really coming up with your own opinions and ideas of what's going to work, you're doing it wrong, right? You do need to get out of the building. You need to talk to as many customers who are in your target market as possible and really kind of learn what it is that you need to deliver to them that will satisfy their need. And another quote that I love is from Edie Catmull, who is one of the co-founders of Pixar. And what he says is that discovery, by definition, means that you don't know the answer when you start, right? So if you're starting with the answer with the solution, you're doing it all wrong. What you do need to do is go through a process of both customer discovery to learn what your customers' needs are, and then product discovery to make sure that the product that you're going to deliver into the marketplace addresses that need, and then you stand a great chance for success. Okay, so these are a series of product principles that I've kind of developed over the course of my product career around what's been helpful for me as I think about building amazing products, right? So the first, not surprising, is obsess over customers. Sometimes I work with teams and I see that they're obsessing over their competition, right? So they look at like what the competitors just launched and then they want to go and copy that. But I think that's the wrong approach. What you really do want to know is who is that customer and are you obsessing over their needs and delivering the right solution? Because your competitor's solution might not be the right one for your customers or your company. And then, of course, you need to be bringing products to market that are valuable and usable. And the only way to know that is to test with customers before launching it. So test to make sure that it's both valuable and that it is usable or simple and easy to use. In the process, you're gonna have to say no to building a lot of things, right? So this is kind of where product strategy lives, and I have a section on product strategy that I'll talk about next. But really, it's about focus. So it's not about doing 100 different things. It's about doing 3 or 4 things really, really well. And to do it well, you're gonna have to say no to lots and lots of things. The other thing I learned in my career is that design really is the difference, right? So it's no longer good to just have like a working product, a functional product. That product also has to be delightful. It has to be elegant. It has to be simple to use. And that's where design lives. So design can really be the key differentiator. Also, I really am a strong believer in lean product discipline. And what lean product discipline is, especially for those of you who follow the lean startup movement, is all around testing and iteration, right? So we have hypotheses around what our customers are going to love, but we don't know. And we need to go and test it and hopefully iterate based on what they're telling us before sending it over to engineers to build. So you can do that through like clickable prototypes and lots of user testing. And then finally, I'm a big believer of outcomes over output, right? So when I talk to product teams, sometimes they define success as, oh, I shipped that mobile app, or I worked on these 6 features, that we committed to on the roadmap. But the reality is, it doesn't matter what you shipped or how many features you delivered. It really is, what outcomes did you achieve, right? So did you deliver a product that customers loved, and then did it move the needle for the business? So I always say outcomes over output. And then the last quote in this section is from Mark Zuckerberg. So he says that, hey, you can be bad at so many things, but as long as you stay focused on how you're providing value to your users, you can get through all that stuff. So I kind of love that. Focus on the customer. Okay, so next section is around product vision, strategy, and metrics. And this is a section where I think a lot of product leaders and founders kind of get tripped up, right? I see so many teams moving straight into roadmaps and features and delivering that without really understanding where they're going, what is their product vision, and how are they going to get there? So let's talk about that. So what is product vision? So the way I've defined product vision is that it's an inspirational statement of the desired end state that you are striving to achieve through the product. So to break down what I just said, it really boils down to 2 key things. So the first is the desired end state. So where are you going? Where do you want to go in 5, 10 years? And then second, how can you deliver this in an inspirational way to get your employees motivated, to get your customers excited, to get your stakeholders and your investors excited, right? So it's both the desired end state and the inspiration. And so to bring this to life, I thought I would share a couple of vision statements that I thought were world-class, and all of us on this call should be is aware of these 2 companies. So the first is Amazon, right? So one of my favorite companies. So Amazon's vision is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, where customers can come to find and buy anything online at the lowest possible prices. So what's amazing to me, with Amazon having been around for now 25 years, is that they've come pretty close to achieving this mission or this vision that Jeff Bezos put out. But can you imagine in the early years of Amazon when Jeff was starting out by shipping books, through a website, right? I think he needed a vision statement to rally his employees around what they were, where they were going, what did they want to achieve, right? So we're starting with books, and that's maybe our beachhead market, but this is really what we're trying to build, an amazing generational type company. And that was probably really inspiring for the early employees who got on board to help Jeff in building this company. Okay, one more example. So Tesla, love Tesla, right? Who doesn't love Tesla? And in fact, one of my partners at Spero Ventures is co-founder of Tesla, Mark Tarpening. Hopefully all of you will get a chance to meet him one day. He's an amazing person. But when Tesla got started, they already knew sort of the vision around what they wanted to achieve, right? So the vision was to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy by creating the most compelling car company of the 21st century. So again, if you break that down, so the end state is the world's transition to sustainable energy, but that the way that they were going to do that in an inspirational way was to build a really compelling car company, a car that was 10 times better than anything else that was out there. And sure, it happens to be electric, but it was going to be an amazing car. And so that, I think, is an amazing vision statement. Okay, next we move into product strategy. So what product strategy really is it's the path to making your vision a reality, right? So you have the vision, which is the end state. How are you going to get there? And really this breaks down into focus areas, right? So focus areas or strategic themes, if you will. And just to highlight that, I wanted to share a couple of examples just to bring this home. So Amazon, again, if you look at sort of the product vision of being the most customer-centric company by delivering Earth's biggest selection, the focus areas that they have defined, and I pulled this out of their annual statement from the early years, was that they were going to achieve this vision through these key strategic initiatives, which was through the content, by making it easy to buy, by making the transactions trusted, and then through fast fulfillment. And then you can see examples of all of the different product features that they delivered that fit within these key themes. And then it's important to also like figure out what your KPIs or your metrics are, right? And so how do you know that you're successful in achieving the vision of where you want to get to? Okay, so Netflix. So Netflix, here is their product strategy. So my good friend, Gib Biddle, who many of you may know his name, he was one of the early employees at Netflix. He was, in fact, the VP of product. And this was in the early days where they were still sort of working on DVDs, but they had this vision of moving towards streaming. And so they defined the vision as deliver on-demand, personalized video entertainment to customers anytime on any device. Now, I think fast forwarding many years later, I think that they've come pretty darn close to achieving this vision. Back then, they were a DVD company. And so the strategic themes or focus areas that they defined to achieve this vision was personalization, making it easy for customers to discover new and exciting titles, making it instant, right? So like you didn't have to wait a few days in the mail for your movie title to come to you, but that we could move towards streaming and make movie watching instant for customers. And then margin enhancing is that like, how do we do this in a way that doesn't break the bank and still builds a healthy, profitable business? And then they defined a number of metrics to help them measure how successful they were in achieving these key strategic objectives. So hopefully that helps you just to really have a good feel for like what strategy is. I have a whole separate 1-hour talk on strategy that maybe I'll come back and share with the team another time, but hopefully that gives you just some ideas. I love this quote from Steve Jobs, and it's so important for whether you're a founder or you're a product leader to really follow. So focus means saying no to the 100 good ideas that are out there. You have to pick carefully. So Steve was as proud of the things that they didn't do at Apple as the things that they did do at Apple. So let that sink in, right? So Apple could have been great at hundreds of different things, but they really chose the 3 or 4 things where they wanted to be world-class, and they just maniacally focused on those things. All right, and before we leave this section, I did want to share a few thoughts around product metrics. So I do think every company and every product leader should really have a North Star metric that they're trying to drive towards. And really to define your North Star metric, look at the customer funnel, right? So there's a customer funnel where it starts with customers first being aware of your company or your product, and then going through the funnel, acquisition, activation, retention, and then hopefully being delighted at the end. Figure out where in the funnel you really want your team to focus on for this quarter or this year. So it could be retention, right? So customers are using the product, but for whatever reason, they're not coming back. And so you may want to look at retention and define your metrics as perhaps it's day 7, day 14, or day 30 retention, which is if a customer starts the journey with your product today, you know, how many of them come back on day 7, day 14, or day 30? Or it could be around lifetime value, or it could be around reducing churn. But define those metrics and rally your teams around the initiatives that are going to help achieve the business outcomes and drive towards your North Star metric. All right, okay, the next section that I want to cover is the role of a PM. And this is where I spend a lot of time with with the founders in my portfolio and sort of defining what does a PM do. So this makes a lot of sense for those of us who are in the call who are PMs, but I think for first-time founders, sometimes it's still a little bit mystifying around what a product manager does day to day. So what a product manager does day to day is, number one, they have to be the voice of the customer, right? So they're going out, they're talking to as many customers as possible, but they have to come back into the building and communicate and advocate for the customer, you know, in all of their team meetings, whether it's with the business, marketing folks, engineering folks. They also have to be the bridge between the business and engineering. So the business has goals that they want to deliver, and we need to also then translate those goals into product solutions, and then hopefully ones that engineering can feasibly implement. But sometimes there are trade-offs to be made, and so the product manager has to be working with the teams to make those trade-offs. They also have to set priorities, right? So what are we going to work on first? What are we going to work on next? And then after that. And it's a really hard job because you're balancing the needs of multiple stakeholders. So you are going out and working with all of your different stakeholder peers, marketing, customer support, engineering, business folks, to really collect their input and make sure that something that you work on isn't necessarily going to hurt or damage something that that's a priority, for example, say the marketing team. Then you're going to define the product, and you're going to work with the design and engineering team to not just build the product, but also to test it all along the way. And then once you ship the product, you're going to look at the data, right? Both quantitative data as well as you're going to talk to users again and get that qualitative feedback. But you're going to look at the data and see if the product is working. And then you're going to iterate on the product to hopefully achieve product market fit. So this is sort of the day-to-day responsibilities of a PM. And then in terms of skills of a great PM, so a question that I often get asked from first-time founders is, okay, but what should I be looking for? Like, who should I be hiring, right? And so, so this is a good framework in terms of like the skills that you should be looking for when you're hiring a great PM. The skills on the left are technical skills. So, you know, what a PM has to be great at in delivering amazing, delightful products to customers. And then the skills on the right is a little bit more sort of senior leadership, especially if you're looking to hire somebody to come and join the executive team. They need to be doing more than just building product, but they also should be bringing in strategic thinking, business maturity. They have to be a great leader, and they have to be a great people manager. So different skills, but these are sort of the key ones that are important for product managers and product leaders to bring. Okay, and then last section is when to bring in a product leader. So when should you bring in your first product leader? So I think it depends on the stage of the company. If you're a seed staged founder, I would say that the product manager has to be you, right? So you have an understanding of who your customer is, and you have a vision around what you want to bring into the world. And you're the one who needs to be working with a small core team to deliver that vision, get the market feedback, iterate on it, and then hopefully find a product that eventually can achieve strong product market fit. So I think that is your primary job as an early stage, maybe seed stage founder. At the Series A, which is typically when you found product market fit, right? So your product serves the needs of your market super well. Then you're going to want to scale. And you raise your next round of capital, and this is sort of the stage where the CEO moves from just building the product to actually building a real business. And so that is oftentimes when it's appropriate to bring in a product manager to help you take over the product function from you, so that you can also focus on building a business and your priorities start to multiply and you get pulled in multiple directions. So what size organization is this? It's typically what I've seen is, you've gotten to like 10 to 15 employees overall. And the number of engineers is also important. So if you've gotten, or if you've hired about 6 to 8 engineers, at some point, if you're the founder and you're still doing product, you will become the bottleneck for those engineers. And so that might be also a good time to bring in your first product hire. And then I just wanted to sort of re-show this slide because another question that I often get asked by founders in my portfolio is, what level should I hire? Should I hire like a junior PM? Should I hire a director? Should I hire a VP? And I think the answer is really, it depends, right? So if you are going to continue as a founder to, to set the product vision and product strategy for your company, and you really want to still be sort of hands-on with the product, then you might want to just look for maybe a junior PM. And by junior, I don't mean super junior. I mean like senior PM or director level, somebody who has 4 to 6, 8 years of experience, who can come in and really take on that product function, but collaborate and work with you hand on hand to agree on the product vision and the strategy, and then to go and implement that. However, if you are at a later stage, maybe it's a late Series A, maybe it's Series B, where you're ready to delegate that sort of product function and sort of strategy to a leader, then you might want to look for a director or maybe an early VP of PM who can also not just build the product, but also think about building a company and building an organization and leading in the industry, right? And so that person has to have great strategic thinking, business maturity, be a leader, and then also hire and coach a great PM team. So that's sort of how I think about sort of whether to bring in somebody junior or a little bit more senior. Okay, last slide before I open it up to questions. So this is really how to help assess PM. So this is sort of a framework that I've used when I hire PMs, both when I was a VP product leader, but even now when I get pulled by my portfolio companies to hire some of their to interview some of their top candidates. So the first thing that I always encourage people to do is that, like, while a PM has to be great at all these things, where do you really need them to excel and to shine, right? And so of these sort of 8 dimensions, what are the top 3 critical skills that this leader must come with? Because there is no unicorn PM. Like there's, PM should be good at all of these, but there will be certain PMs that will be world-class and exceptional at a certain number of these. So if you can get your executive team together and agree on the top 3 skills that this PM hire has to bring in, has to come to the table with, then you know what to look for, you know what to interview for. And so this sort of web framework that I've developed is that, say you think that the top 3 skills is customer empathy, business maturity, and people management, right? So those are the top 3. Then you can put this web in front of potential PM candidates and say, okay, here are all the things that PM should be good at, but we know that you can't be exceptional at everything. Go and mark off where you think you are relative in skill-wise than everything else. So what are the things that you're the best at, and what are the things that maybe you still need some development on, right? And so you can't score perfect on every single dimension, right? And then give me examples for each of these skills of how you've demonstrated that. And as the candidate goes and sort of marks off kind of their competency in each of these different areas, then you can match it up against the competencies that you're looking for, right? So if you said that, hey, customer empathy is really important, but that product manager like marked off in the dotted line that like that's not really like their core skill set, then you know that it's a mismatch. So that's sort of one way to assess and look for PMs that really bring in that superpower that you're looking for, as you look to have somebody take over the product function of your startup. So I think with that, I will pause there and happy to take any questions from the group.
Great, thanks, Hua. I think I'm gonna pick the first person to ask the first question, and this is more related to the last part when you talk about a PM role and the skill set of a PM. So the person is called the zone. The zone, I just click the button to allow you talk. Why don't you ask the question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
How you doing? I want to know what's the difference between, especially early stage CTO versus a PM in detail.
Yeah, so with the early stage, the CTO, sometimes I've seen the CTO do both the product function and the engineering function, but really, I think that there should be sort of a separation of the different roles, right? So the CTO is responsible for the delivery or the how, and the PM, and that PM, could be a founder, might not necessarily be a separate PM hire at the earliest stages, but it should be somebody who is really thinking about the what, not the how, right? And so that person has to be going out, talking to customers, really coming back to the team, sharing the insight with the team around what the customer needs are, but really understanding business goals and priorities, coming up with the what it is that we should be building, and then going out and testing it again with customers. And so if you think about it, it is too hard for one person, especially the CTO, to both do the what and then the delivery, right? Like there's just not enough hours in the day. So while I think some teams sometimes start with having the product manager and the CTO role combined, I highly recommend against it, because if you were to do the product function well, you don't have enough time in the day to do both the what and the delivery.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. Great question.
Hi, so our next question is going to come from Jennifer Lee, and I am just going to enable her to
Hi, Jennifer.
her question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
My question is, can you share some pitfalls you saw in the past that caused companies to fail in their product?
Jennifer, can you just repeat the question a little bit louder?
Oh, sorry. Is it better right now?
I think so.
Okay. Can you share some pitfalls you saw in the past that caused companies to fail in the product?
To fill in the product?
Like
They fail.
Oh, to fail in the product. Okay, yeah. So, so one common pitfall is that teams don't spend enough time in the product problem space, right? So I'll go back to this slide here. Oh, not this slide, sorry, this slide. So I think that teams just love to live in the solution space. So they end up like, so yeah, they have a hypothesis around what they want to build. Maybe they've spent, a little bit of time with customers. Maybe they talk to 2, 3, 4 customers. And they're like, aha, I know what it is. And then they want to just go build it. And really one of the sort of key lessons that I shared earlier is you have to spend as much time, if not more time, in the problem space and go out and talk to lots of customers, just because the 3 or 4 that you talk to might not be representative of your target market. And so really spend more time in the problem space than the solution space. The teams that fail end up like just spending time in the solution space, like building out like what they think is the right solution for their customers. And it turns out like after they ship the product that it just doesn't work and their customers don't care and they don't use the product and they don't come back, right? And then so you have to start all over again. So that's, I think, one failure that I've seen repeat itself over and over and over again. But great question. Thank you, Jennifer.
All right, the next question is from Sahita. Sahita, I just allowed you to talk. Go ahead to ask your question.
Hi, thanks so much for presenting. I was wondering, how does one go about doing like customer testing or feedback if the product is B2B? Because it seems like much harder to do something when you're dealing with like a more established customer rather than like independent people you can just get through like AdWords or by talking in your neighborhood, etc.
Yeah, so I think it's actually not so dissimilar, Sahita. So first of all, even if it's a B2B customer, say like it's a company, right? Within the company, there is often a couple key folks that you want to talk to. So there's one, the the buyer, right, or the decision maker of who is going to buy the software solution that you're trying to introduce to them. And then there's also the end user. And I think that it's more complicated because there are those two different groups. Whereas like in a B2C company, it's just often the end user is the customer. In a B2B company, there is sort of the buyer with the budget, and then there's the end user. And I do think that you do want to talk to both groups, but figure out like who in the SaaS world, the target customer is actually called ICP, or ideal customer profile, right? So like, are you going after small, medium business? Are you going after mid-market? Are you going after enterprise? And then go and just find, for that target market, say like it's mid-market, go and identify the number of companies that fit the ideal customer profile, figure out who in the company is the buyer and who might be the end user of the product, and go and interview them, right? So sometimes, and I don't always recommend incentivizing them, but like sometimes it might just be like, hey, if you could just spend 30 minutes with me over Zoom, or 45 minutes over coffee, happy to give you 3 months free of my product, or something. But like mostly people are generous with their time when they know that you're committed to solving their problems. But yeah, so it's not so different. It's just that maybe there's two different users versus just one user that you want to talk to. And you do want to make sure that those users kind of fit the ideal customer profile that you've defined, and then figure out who the stakeholders are within the company that you're looking to sell into.
Thanks. Is it okay if I ask a quick follow-up to that?
Sure, of course.
How do you determine like if you've met, or if you have product market fit with that like B2B business? Like let's say you've got customer feedback.
Yeah. So I think, so back to metrics, I think that two leading indicators around whether you have product market fit is engagement with the product, and then also annual churn. So engagement with the product. So, and I've seen this, right, where products are sold into companies where the buyer and the end user is different. And so the buyer buys it, but the end user wasn't bought in and they don't use the product. So you can see that in the engagement metrics, whether it's logins or page views or interactions with different events within the product. So you'll sort of see the engagement, and the engagement then is a leading indicator for like the key North Star metric, which is annual renewals, or the opposite of that is churn, right? So like if the end buyer doesn't use it, doesn't see value in it, isn't coming back frequently with the product, you will see that customer churn and, in the numbers. And so those are a few key metrics that I look for to see if there's product market fit. And then of course, I guess another dimension is that you can always talk to customers and survey them, right? So I'm a big fan, if anybody's ever read any of my blog posts, of Net Promoter Score. So that's a great measure of customer satisfaction. The Net Promoter Score question is on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend this product to a friend or a colleague? And what you want to see is that the Net Promoter Score is above 40. And the score ranges from -100 to 100. So like if 100% of people like love the product and are promoters, you'll get scores closer to that upper end. If there's more detractors, so they score in the 0 to 6, they're not that excited about the product to share it with a friend or a colleague. And so you'll start seeing even negative scores. So Net Promoter Score is also another way to sort of see if you have product market fit.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Sahida.
All right, our next question comes from Raghav. Raghav, I think you have to unmute your mic, but otherwise I've handed it off to you. Okay. I guess his mic is still...
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, now
Hi,
we can hear you.
Hi, Raghav.
Can't hear.
I can hear you. Or not.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and ask this question for him.
Sure.
What are the different stages a startup should be in for different rounds? For example, the presentation suggested that Series A is when a startup should have product market fit. What are the similar signals for Series B and Series C and so on?
Yeah, so you know, at Spero Ventures, we invest primarily at the Series A, although we do some like sort of late seed rounds. And at the Series A, you definitely have to have product market fit. Series B and C are really growth stage, right? So it's all about scaling, right? So you have one product that works in the market. How do you blow it out and capture the whole market, right? So how do you increase the share of the market share with your product? At some point, and this really happens at the Series B and C, like that one product that kind of got you the growth that you needed, that growth will start to slow down. And for you to really become a very interesting, valuable, say, public company, you really need to start thinking about product line extensions, right? Or maybe new markets to cover. That could be like international or sort of geographic expansion. It could be product line extensions. It could be even new business lines, right? And so at the Series B and C, that's kind of what you're looking for, because no matter what stage you are, like the CEO that you work for will never be happy around what the growth is. They're always going to think, grow more, right? So triple growth is not enough sometimes. And so you're going to have to just start extending the product into more customer segments, more markets, and maybe even develop new product lines. So hopefully that answered the question, Rago.
All right, I will jump in with another question by AJ. AJ, you're unmuted. Go ahead, ask your question.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. So for PMs that have a more like a big corporation background, and then they are looking to move into startup space. So I'm just wondering, like, whether there's any kind of a skill gap that you have seen. It's more like a common skill gap that maybe those people could try to like enhance or improve before they join the startup.
Yeah, so that is a great question, AJ. So let me just start by saying that during my product career, one of the things that I realized that I was never going to be good at was being a PM at the later stages, right? Because at the later stages, there's a lot more focus on sort of optimizations than innovation. And at the later stages, there's a lot more focus on like getting cross-functional buy-in, maybe there's some politics involved, but like as a result, it does take longer, to ship product. And maybe you're also ridden with tech debt that like, the engineering teams need to pay down. And so it just takes longer to innovate, and try out different things. Now, that's a generalization. There's some big companies that still continue to be great and move fast. Google, Amazon, Facebook, I think being some great examples. But if you don't come from those environments, say you sort of come from like old school corporate, then I think that just learning these frameworks and figuring out how to apply these frameworks, whether it's maybe like there's a startup group within your company that you can sort of try some of these frameworks with, and hopefully get the permission to experiment. Or if you can't get it at your company, then maybe it's working with a startup and advising while you're still at your big company, right? Kind of getting a feel for sort of the speed and the velocity of which you need to move, I think will be very helpful as you look to maybe move earlier to sort of the startup phase.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks for the question, AJ.
So our next question comes from Mary Haggerty. I'm gonna pass the mic off to her. Mary, you may have to unmute your mic in order to speak. There you go.
Hi. So here's my question. We're a marketplace, so we're B2B and B2C. Which customer is more important for us to focus on, the business or the consumer?
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't think I can give you an answer to that, because I think we'd have to just dig in a little bit more, because I think at the earliest stages, it's hard to build out two very separate businesses, right? Like a customer business and a business marketplace. just and don't take offense to this, I actually wonder if that's sort of the right strategy, because I do think focus at the earliest stages is important and really like win in one core market before expansion. But you and I can chat about it separately. And I think like to really answer that question, I'd have to dig a little bit more into what you're doing to kind of, share my thoughts around whether the end customer is who you should be going after first, or the business customer. So maybe you can email me and we can have a quick chat offline.
Okay.
Does that
Sounds
work?
good.
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
I still want to give an
Thanks.
answer because I don't know enough of the details of your business.
Okay.
All right, next question. We're gonna ask Wanda Lee. You're unmuted. Feel free to ask your question.
Hi, Ha. Thanks for the information and the frameworks that you've presented. My question is on how you've bridged the gap between what customers think they want and what the company's longer term vision is. And what came to mind was Henry Ford's faster horse quote. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses and not cars.
Yeah, great question. So the answer to that is actually quite simple, which is you don't ask them what they want because they don't know. And that's not, so you're not trying to ask your customers to tell you what to do. Oh. Somebody trying to say something? Okay, so I'll keep going. You're not asking your customers what you should be building, right? So you're not asking them to talk to you about products or solutions. You're really going kind of even before that, which is you're just trying to understand their needs and their pain points. And a good way to also really understand what their needs or pain points are is like the 6 whys, right? Like if you've ever heard sort of that framework used in product management, which is like, if they tell you something, which is like, hey, I'm doing my taxes and I just really like need, it's such a pain. I just need to save time. And then you might want to drill in. It's like, well, okay, well, why? Why do you need to save time? What's important about that, right? And then they might share some other things with you. And so it's really important to like be very open-ended with the questions and really just drill in, keep asking why with your customers, but like ignore any solutions. Like they might give you some ideas and those ideas might be valid or they may not be, but like your goal in talking to customers is not around the solution space. It really is understanding their problems and their needs, and by sort of continuing to drill in, ask the why behind whatever answer they give you. And then once you develop that key insight, then you go back to the team and then you ideate, right? Like, based on sort of the key insight that I learned, like what are all the different possible solutions, that could help solve the customer need or pain? And let's diverge before then we converge. And then even when we converge on what we think the ideal solution is, we'll still go back out and test it with customers by maybe building a prototype and then taking it to customers and then making sure that the solution that we came up with, not that they came up with, still is meeting their need or their pain point. So that's the best way to do it. Don't build features that customers are requesting because they might not be the right features. Did that answer your question, AJ? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay.
You're good. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, just going through our next question. Okay, so our next question comes from Vineeth. I don't think he's on the call anymore, so I'll ask it on his behalf.
Okay.
Since you tend to specialize with early stage companies, how do you engage with customers early on to explore the problem space? And how do you motivate them to speak with you? Cold emails may not work so well. What other strategies or recommendations do you have for getting in touch with them?
Yeah, so a couple of ways to do it, and I think just to repeat the question, so you're in early stage. How do you convince customers to spend 30 minutes or 45 minutes with you, right, at a coffee shop or wherever they are to speak with you? So I think there's a few ways to do it, right? So at the earliest stages, hopefully you have some customers already. I think that's a great way to do it, is just go to your existing customer base, right? Like it might be 5 or 6. And a subset of them like are so excited to co-create with you, right? Because they came to your product looking for a solution, and they are more than willing to like share feedback on how to make the product better. And a great example that I have of this is Jess Lee. If anybody knows who Jess Lee is, she's a partner at Sequoia, but she was an early adopter of Polyvore. And in the earliest days, like 3 months, the product was shipped, and then she went out and sought out the founders and said, like, hey, the product, I like love the idea behind the product. It's just not quite working for me, and here's all the ideas I have. So I would say that like especially if you're working for a B2C company, you have a list of early customers. Don't be afraid to reach out to them and just ask them, for their time, and you'd be surprised how many would say yes. If you don't have that, another way to do it is like you can put an ask out there, and and it could be that you have to incentivize folks. So like it could be a Craigslist ad, where it's like, okay, spend 30 minutes with me, to share feedback around an idea, around something that we're working on, and in exchange we'll give you a $50 Amazon gift card. But what I would do is that I would make sure that I would screen to make sure that that customer fits the target profile. So, so I would probably put out like a Google form with a bunch of questions to make sure that they fit the target customer or persona, or the ideal customer profile. And if they do, and you probably want to have somebody like go through and screen for that, then you can schedule those interviews. And then at the end of the interview, thank them with a $30, $50 Amazon gift card or a Starbucks gift card. So that's another way to do it.
Great. Next question comes from anonymous attendee. So I will ask for this person. The question is, how do you think PM roles and responsibilities and marketing? I guess this person means probably product marketing. How do you think PM role and responsibility and product marketing in general will change in the next 1, 3, or even 5 years?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So my thoughts are like fundamentally the role of the product manager isn't going to change all that much, right? So if you look at sort of the day-to-day responsibilities, I think that even in 3 to 5 years, like this all still continues to be true, which is, they need to represent the customer, and then they need to be working hand in hand with the business and the engineers to sort of deliver on the needs. They got to set priorities. They got to collect stakeholder buy-in, build the product, iterate on the product. So I think that doesn't change. Now, what might change is that the nature of products might change, right? Like, so voice was hot, over the last few years. AI, machine learning, is very in vogue. And so your skill sets around the technology need to maybe continue to evolve there. But no matter what you're working on building, the function and the responsibilities of the product manager, I don't see evolving. I think it's going to be what I've listed out here.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we're at time. So I'm going to hand it off to Caro to close off.
So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. As you can see, like we have more questions than we have time. And this was really successful. And I think the topic that you spoke about is so important for all startup. I mean, of course, to all startups, and especially the early ones, when it's really hard to find, like it's extremely hard to find the product market fit. So thank you so much for talking about this. I want to thank everybody who joined us today. This event is recorded, and we are going to send out the link to the recording in the next few days. And we are also going to send you a survey about how you like this event pretty shortly after the end, sometime today. And with that, I want to thank everybody, and hopefully you will join us at our next event, which will be next week. So thank you all. And thank you so much, Ha and Alice
Thank you,
and
Caroline,
Shilpa.
Alice, Shilpa for hosting me. And with those who are still with us, please, please, please do fill out that Net Promoter Score survey. So this is one of the first times I've given this talk. So it's really helpful to get the feedback on what you liked and what you didn't like about it so that I can continue to evolve the talk and improve it for future audiences. So thank you so much for spending the time with me today. And thank you to the organizers.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.